I'm going to use some old school high-tech graphics here to display to kind of cover some concurrency concepts before we dive in and look at how I implemented my concurrency strategy for the application. When iOS launches your application, the operating system gives your application a single thread of execution. This thread of execution is called the main thread. And let me show you here how this works. Everything in the application runs on the main thread unless you take specific action not to do that. So there are certain things that need to run on the main thread. Things like interacting with the user, things like painting or laying out or measuring or displaying anything on the screen. All that has to happen on the UI thread. So let's say that we have a piece of work here. I'll call work number 1. And this is a queue. The concurrency in iOS works with this concept of having queues. Work gets queued and it gets dispatched to a thread of execution, and a thread of execution can handle one thing at a time. It can only do one thing. So let's say the user taps on something, and that's piece of work number 1. When this thread is idle and there's nothing going on, it will pull the work from its queue. So let's take this and move it down here to the thread, and it starts doing its work, whatever that is. Let's say it's tapping, handling a tap or something. And in the meantime, something else happens. Work number 2 occurs. Well, since the thread is busy doing work number 1, it can't take anything from the queue. So it gets queued. And in the meantime, let's say something else comes up. Another piece of work arrives in the queue. So things start piling up in here, and another 4. So the main thread is busy handling this piece of work here, and things are piling up in the queue. As soon as this is done, it's then going to grab the next piece of work and drop it in here and start executing that. And then when it's done, it's just going to continue until it drains the queue. So as the user is scrolling or tapping or things are happening, things are accumulating in the queue of the main thread, and as the thread finishes a piece of work, it takes another piece. And then when it finishes that, it continues to take another piece. So this is generally the way iOS works with your application, and everything it does, unless you take specific action, occurs using this model. One thread and a queue that accumulates work. That includes you making network requests to get data, you saving things in a database. Anything your application does, unless you take specific action, occurs just like this.